Hello and welcome to the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the head of news for the Cradle. Joining me, as usual, are my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmin Narwani. And before we start today, I just want to thank you for liking this video, for subscribing, for sharing it with everyone you know, and for visiting our Patreon, where you can become a supporter of the Cradle, because everything we do here is all thanks to you.
I really want to just say something. Last week when we did our podcast on Meta banning the Cradle permanently on Instagram and Facebook, I think maybe you made an extra push because we had 4 times the number of Patreon subscribers as we have had in a previous podcast. Yeah, so I can't thank you enough. I saw each and every one of your names personally. I'm very, very happy.
But in any case, let's get on with the show. So today, obviously, we need to start with the retaliation from Hezbollah. They finally launched this much anticipated retaliation for the killing of top commander Fuad Shukr in Beirut about a month ago at this point.
27 days ago.
Yeah. Codename Operation 48 Day. It saw the launch of hundreds of rockets, hundreds of drones, targeting 11 sites, overcoming some of the Israeli air defenses. Hezbollah has said, this is it, right? This has been what a retaliation will be up until this point. They said, we reserve the right to launch another attack if what we intended to hit maybe didn't cause the damage that we wanted to. But for now...
Or have the impact on Israeli military calculation.
And on the Israeli side, what they're saying is that they shot down thousands of rockets, that it was a complete success. They talk about a preemptive strike before the Hezbollah strike, which kind of makes no sense when you actually look at what happened and the timing of things. But let's get into it. Let's actually talk about what happened. What was the Hezbollah retaliation?
So the retaliation was a very precise yet complex operation. The first stage of it, there were 2 stages essentially. The first stage of it was to use 340 Katyusha rockets aimed at almost a dozen Israeli military bases and barracks.
Not just in the north, though, right? They went pretty deep this time.
I mean, I remember from Nasrallah's thing, he spoke about the Galilee and Golan ones they'd hit before. This was where 340 Katyusha rockets were aimed at, and this is phase 1 of the operation, was to engage Israel's air defenses fully, so that phase 2 of the operation, which was drones, could be launched on the actual targets. And the main targets, it appears, were the Gilot military intelligence headquarters. Now, this is important. This is where Unit 8200 of the Israeli military is based. It's a military intelligence unit. There's huge spying surveillance equipment there. The military personnel and Gilot manage assassination ops and psychological operations. This location, importantly, is 100 kilometers away from the Lebanese border, which is the deepest Hezbollah has gone thus far into Israel's strategic depth. And it's only 1,500 meters away from Tel Aviv. By far the deepest Hezbollah has gone since October 8th, when it started its operations. So it was Gilot, and then the other ones, Ain Shemer, which is a multi-layered missile air defense base and a new target for the Lebanese resistance. In this part of the second phase of the operation, they used drones by and large. Small drones, large ones, different models, etc. We know that some of the Hezbollah operation was launched from as deep in Lebanon as the Bekaa Valley. This was, in the view of Hassan Nasr, a very successful operation. They managed to do the decoy part of the operation initially, engage and deplete Israel's air defense projectiles, and then hit their targets, which they believe were involved in the assassination of Fuad Shukr.
Exactly. So I just want to go into what Hassan Nasr said yesterday. He gave a speech in which he called it an Israeli intelligence failure and a failure in preemptive action. He said the enemy did not thwart anything, right? This is in response to Israel claiming, that they shot down all of these missiles that Hezbollah didn't even launch. And then he calls, the Israeli narrative is full of lies. He calls it a Hollywood movie.
The Israelis say there were 8,000, that they clocked that back to 6,000 missiles. And Hezbollah said, no, we used exactly 340 missiles.
Exactly.
Katyusha rockets, not even missiles. Nothing new.
It's the first time they target that deep in Israel. It's not only from October 7. And the phase one of the operation was a decoy. As Shamim said, they targeted around 12 sites and bases. 5 of them were in Julan Heights, in Syria's occupied Julan, and the others were near the border.
So, let's talk about one of the things that Nasrallah repeated throughout his speech yesterday was Israeli lies. Like, this was the Hollywood script, he said. It was that bad. During the course of the day, so this strike was in the morning, early morning, and then he said during the course of the day, you could see Israel changing numbers, details, facts. And he reminds us that in July 2006, Israel claimed to have destroyed 80% of Hezbollah's long-range missiles. In this case, on Sunday, it claimed to have either intercepted all of Hezbollah's projectiles or destroyed its launch sites. Then Nasrallah goes on to say, look, hitting launch sites is not a big deal. They cost about $10,000 for us to set up, and we're constantly changing them anyways, because you never want them to be around long enough for the enemy to detect them, right? So he said they hit 2 large sites, basically a cost of $20,000 in military damage to Hezbollah, whereas today we've heard from the Israeli media that the Israeli strikes on Sunday cost the state $120 million.
The preemptive strikes, or whatever they called it. This reminds me of what's happening in Yemen, right? When you have the United States flying these planes that cost billions of dollars, firing rockets that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to these launch platforms that then the Yemenis just kind of, move to the next one over, or just like take a day setting it up, and it just elevates the cost, right? And then you have Israel claiming that yesterday morning, I remember seeing that they hit like thousands of launchers or hundreds of launchers. They were using like these, they were making it sound like they raised the south of Lebanon.
Yeah, they hit two launch pads. So, $8,000 no.
Exactly. This is the Hollywood narrative that Nasrallah is talking about. In the meantime, you have the settlers in the north again coming out and saying, we're abandoned. The government is inexistent up here. There's absolutely no security for us. It's a complete state of panic right now. Israel, by launching what they did yesterday, right, when they're all preemptive, we hit thousands of Hezbollah targets, whatever. They're kind of framing it as this was already a response, right? Like it's kind of a similar thing to what we saw in April with Iran, in which Iran launches these, following a similar strategy, overwhelm their defenses, hit the intended target. And then Israel goes and does something in Iran with a single drone. It feels like a similar thing, like kind of just them trying to put the matter to bed. Then again, with Israel, you can never really count on them putting anything to bed when it comes to, killing others.
No, you're right. And in a sense, one of the striking things about Nasrallah's speech on Sunday was that he said, okay, we're over now for this phase. And I thought, how can you be so sure? But in fact, he correctly read, so far at least, that Israel would consider its early strike the retaliation for this. Because in fact, Israel has not responded in the way you think it would when Hezbollah has reached its absolute red lights, hitting Tel Aviv, and this, the other reason Nasrallah may have calculated this is because he knows what a gut punch the Hezbollah Arba'in operation of Sunday was on Israel. Now, we have no details of this because the Israelis immediately clamped down, massive military censorship. You could see no videos, no footage, no imagery of any hit sites. Very early on, there were 1 or 2 that got out, and then they were gone from the internet.
There was one video that I just want to bring up, and I'm sure we can put it on screen, and it was the Iron Dome missile that went awry and hit one of their own ships. And that's the only fatality that we so far know of, because yes, they have completely gone into media silence.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that at the beginning they said that they destroyed 6,000 missiles that were aimed at Tel Aviv. And we know that the Israeli army usually publishes videos of like if they target a motorcycle, but they don't have footage of 6,000 missiles that they destroyed in South America.
The only thing we did see was interception missiles, Iron Dome interception missiles hitting incoming Katyusha rockets. We did a piece on, I think it was a week ago, on, the heap of metal that is the Iron Dome,
Yes.
showing that it is most effective against rockets, not actual missiles, right? Not ballistic missiles or anything like that. And so Hezbollah employed Katyusha rockets, specifically knowing this, specifically targeting decoy military targets. And then, of course, the Israelis showed interception. But it turns out that should have been an embarrassment for them, because they fell into the trap. And so we're not seeing more interception videos, up and about. But what are ultimately the strategic results? Because we can't think like the Americans and the Israelis who take a hammer to every nail. We have to think, like the Axis does. Every military operation is created, devised to achieve a strategic result.
Exactly.
So one, his breached Israel's red line, which was its strategic depth. Israel has incrementally in the last few months tried to go deeper and deeper and deeper into Lebanon. And this was Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is the Mecca for the Israelis. It targeted military sites only, okay, even in its decoy targets, which I think places further pressure on Israel's civilians target strategy, kill as many people and cause pain, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank or in Lebanon, right? Because this, while Hezbollah very clearly is only hitting military targets and Israel is very clearly hitting civilian ones, this increasingly makes Israel look bad, look like a rogue military operation, and or makes its intelligence look incompetent. How can you keep hitting non-military targets? What kind of intelligence are you gathering that you keep doing this?
It's just that we were talking about, right, the use of the word terrorists when it came to our ban. And when it comes to, obviously, to Hezbollah, to Hamas, etc., they're all terrorists in the West, right? They're all like these groups just like that lust for the blood of the Jewish people in Israel in particular. And you have Israel massacring people by the thousands. Civilians, they have seen no end, right? There's just the fact that we haven't really gotten into the topic of what's happening inside Gaza doesn't mean that it has stopped. It has continued unabated. And then you have these terrorist groups going kind of out of their way to avoid civilian targets, right?
Correct. It constantly, challenges the narrative they worked so hard to set. In fact, it is Israel that is employing terror, okay?
Exactly.
Striking fear into the hearts of civilians, whereas Hezbollah, Ansarullah, the Iranians, are hitting military targets consistently. The other strategic goal accomplished by the Arbaeen operation is it keeps Israel's military super and hyper-focused on the northern border, which draws resources and air defenses, etc., away from Gaza. It also leaves Israel still awaiting, in painful anticipation, other further operations, because Nasrallah made clear that while he said this was our first retaliation, right? And then he suggested it could be the last if Israel learns from it. If Israel, if Israel learns from it, we're not so confident in that. But, and he also, mentioned that this is not the Iranian, the Yemeni, and the Iraqi resistance response to Israel yet. So Israel is still going to be kept in painful anticipation for the foreseeable future. This maintains constant pressure on Israel to challenge every day its calculations on its Gaza genocide, whether on the ground or in ceasefire negotiations.
So Sharmin also mentioned that Israel didn't retaliate as people expect. And we know because now Hezbollah is very powerful and that there's resistance in Lebanon that is protecting the Lebanese. Because if we go back in history, in March 1978, there was an operation in Tel Aviv, and the Israeli government accused Lebanese people that operate from Lebanon that they are responsible for this operation. And in the same month, Israel invaded Lebanon till the Litani River. The same Litani River that they are now asking the Americans and the UN to pressure Hezbollah to move behind. So this is the power of Hezbollah, this is the power of resistance. And also in 1982, there were operations against Israel, and due to these operations, Israel invaded Lebanon and it reached Beirut. And the same thing happened in the 90s and in 1993 and 1996, when Lebanese or the resistance used to make any operation inside the Lebanese territories. These territories were occupied by Israel. Israel used to launch an air campaign and destroy infrastructure, electricity, gas stations across Lebanon. But now, as Sharmeen said, now Hezbollah targeted them with more than 300 missiles, and they targeted Tel Aviv, and they announced that they targeted Tel Aviv, so it doesn't make any difference if they hit it or not, because they announced that we targeted it, and they intended to target it, and now after 24 hours, we don't see any retaliation from Israel.
But I think what was funny and seems to be making the rounds of social media is that photo op of all the, war cabinet leaders, Netanyahu, Galad, etc., sitting looking stone-faced and gray almost in a room after the Hezbollah strikes, while photographers were taking pictures. Either it was too early in the morning for them or they're looking grave for a reason. I want to talk about something, though. Like, we have now ourselves slipped a few times and said Israel's preemptive strike. Now, let's not forget the absolute brilliance of the Israelis and the Americans in framing things to their benefit. What preemptive strike? Preemptive strike is something we inherited from the grotesque Bush doctrine, which basically argued that if you thought someone was going to hit you, right, thought a country and group was going to hit the United States, you could, obliterate them beforehand. Now, the problem with this is that we're relying entirely on U.S. intelligence sources, and we've seen how bad that information is, that is not transparent to the public and not made available to the public, to believe that a group or a country was going to attack the United States, and so the United States, without government, without authorization from Congress, launched an attack on this group or state. They've normalized, the Bush doctrine normalized this concept of preemptive strikes, and Israel used it. Okay, let me tell you why this was not a preemptive strike. There's a group called the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data. All right, it follows military conflict and the exchange of fire. ACLED is the acronym. ACLED is funded by the European Commission, by some U.S. money, by money from European states. And in a report recently, it revealed that since October 8th, Israel has attacked Lebanon nearly 4 times as much as Lebanon has attacked Israel. This is a 120-kilometer border between Israel and Lebanon, okay? So here's the data from ACLED. Between October 7th and July 31st, there have been at least 8,533 attacks across that border. 82% of these attacks, which is 7,033 incidents, killing at least 601 people in Lebanon, were by Israel. 82% of the clashes between Lebanon and Israel have been initiated by the Israelis. Hezbollah and other armed groups were responsible for only 1,500 of those attacks, in which 23 Israelis were killed. So when you talk about a retaliatory strike, when you are the aggressor party, when you are the one launching 82% of these attacks, therefore demanding a response, Okay, as we see Israel is demanding responses from its adversaries by assassinations, by massacres, by infiltrating Lebanon with more depth each and every time. It's literally provoking them into conflict. But it is Israel that is the aggressor in the vast majority of these attacks. Retaliatory strike, the term used by Israelis is oxymoronic. They are not retaliating, they are aggressing each and every time.
So, Sharmina, I just wanted to cut in because everything you said is correct. One thing, though, because in June, when ACLED released one of their first reports, and they said, that Hezbollah has only launched 1,000 and something, Hezbollah, they didn't deny it, but their own releases appointed to their attacks being higher than what ACLED was accounting for. So Israel is 100% responsible for a large majority of the attacks between, in this protracted war that we're seeing in the southern Lebanese border. But the number of attacks that ACLED has recorded for Hezbollah is not exactly, that reliable because they do it themselves. They rely on the Israelis. They rely on the Israelis to tell them. And as we just saw, the Israelis like to, spin this narrative in which they thwart all of the attacks and they destroy all of the launch sites and they do this and they do that. So there's always these little asterisks, right? Which
There's an asterisk, yes. I agree, but I think it's undeniable that Israel does the majority of the strikes and therefore cannot talk about preemptive strikes in any serious way. Also keep in mind that UNIFIL, the UN forces that are based in Lebanon to watch the border, basically for the Israelis, it seems, have now taken command of several radar systems provided by the French and Spanish government and are employing them in the border. Al Akhbar, the Lebanese daily newspaper, very high circulation paper, has claimed that they're providing that information to others, which is helping Israel because Hezbollah has taken out most of Israel's eyes and ears inside its territory, right? So these kind of radar systems are also capable of capturing things beyond what the Israelis provide to these monitoring groups.
I think also it's worth mentioning that the United States aided Israel in thwarting the attack that has been launched yesterday.
Well, that has been the case since October 7, and actually, Karim, because this morning, just as we started, before we started recording, the 500 transport plane, U.S. military transport plane carrying military aid for Israel landed in Ben Gurion, I would imagine. Imagine that, 500 planes, 107 ships since October 7th, carrying 50,000 tons of armament and military equipment.
Basically, the United States is footing the bill for and waging this war on Gaza, on Lebanon, on Iraq, on Yemen, on Syria. Correct. 50,000 tons of weaponry for Israel since October 7th. That's insane. Israel has nothing. Nasrallah actually said this after a month or so of the war. He said, Israel's out of weapons. Everything it's getting is now from the United States and its allies.
And it's not just out of weapons, not to extend too long on this topic, but it's also, look at how long, it's been 10 months, right? It's been almost 11 months at this point. And it's daily bombing campaigns, airstrike campaigns. These planes, the F-16s, the F-35s, if they're even working, the F-whatevers that they have, F-22s, they need to keep to a regular maintenance schedule, right? They are not designed to be constantly flying and dropping bombs. So Israel right now, I saw Scott Reeder talk about this a couple of weeks ago. He was talking about how the maintenance logs must be all in the red because Israel has been just nonstop, as has the United States in delivering their weapons. But what makes these weapons delivered also very relevant? The ceasefire talks. That the new round of ceasefire talks, another term that is completely incorrect, just like preemptive strike, because these are not ceasefire talks. These are, Israel and the U.S. sitting at a table looking at each other, and, the Egyptians and Qataris just kind of awkwardly being there because, Hamas is not there. And although Hamas sent a delegation over the weekend, they were very clear in saying, we're only going to receive the information that the Qataris and the Egyptians give to us. They left overnight. They said no progress has been made. despite the fact that, if you listen to CNN and the New York Times or whoever in the West, they make it sound, like it's always Hamas, the one that is putting all of the sticking points and being intransigent and this and that.
But Euromed, Reuters said today or yesterday that basically these talks amount to nothing more than the Israelis and Americans negotiating with each other.
They amount to nothing but theater, essentially, The Mohammed Shahada of Euromed Monitor, he talks about this being, these talks, or the way they're being presented, being just kind of held to help Kamala Harris during the DNC, right? It was like the timing needed to be there for them. We talked about this last week as well, about how having the talks kind of gives them this out of if Iran attacks, they can always be like, oh, it's Iran who doesn't want the talks. They talk about, this guy Shahada talks about fake positivity. He says that the new U.S. proposal capitulates to everything Netanyahu wants and doesn't consider what Hamas is asking for. So at this point, it's just kind of like the United States, and by extension, Egypt and Qatar, are telling Hamas, just agree.
And Hamas is not going to. I mean, this is a prisoner-led Hamas, and why on earth would they agree to a temporary ceasefire after which the Israelis can bomb them to smithereens again? Nobody would declare this.
So they can save the on in democracy, and that what it is.
So just to bring to the attention of some of our viewers, some of the issues that are holding up these talks, or rather some of the goalposts that have been moved by Israel since the Joe Biden deal that was offered earlier this summer, which Hamas accepted. Israel has added other conditions that are not acceptable to Hamas. They want to keep troops in Gaza forevermore. They want to take control of the Netzarim corridor, which is the corridor, as we mentioned before many times on this podcast. It's a east-west corridor that basically severs Gaza in two, separates north from south. Israel also insists on having military control of the Rafah border, which is Gaza's border with Egypt. But during this last week, an organization called Forensic Architecture Research Group revealed of the building of a new Israeli army land corridor east of Gaza City in the northern part of the Strip since November. So this is like a secret new corridor. It's the second east-west corridor that the Israeli military has built. Basically, the group Forensic Architecture revealed that in November, when Israel's ground, the ground part of its operation started in the Gaza Strip, Israel began clearing farms and orchards hundreds of meters from the eastern perimeter of Gaza and the Beit Hanun neighborhood. And then they started to see through satellite pictures a new road being built by the Israeli military that provided direct access to Gaza City, where they were having a very hard time entering because it's a very densely populated area. Buildings are very close to each other, small streets, etc., where they suspected Hamas fighters were hiding. So this wasn't like you wouldn't be able to invade an area like this. You'd have to go like house by house, street by street. So they continued clearing farms and orchard in an ad hoc way until March of 7th. May 7th of this year. Forensic Architecture noted that the majority of Palestinian homes and farms within the first kilometer of this perimeter had been cleared out, and 11 days later, Israel's military was widening the corridor. By June, the road now appears on satellite maps with an approximately 900-meter wide corridor. This is, going to negotiations and saying, okay, we're going to step back. Now we want control of the Netzarim, which is holding up talks, and we want control of Rafah border, which is holding up talks. Among their many other...
These are the impossible demands.
And impossible demands. They are building secondary corridors, that are not even yet in the negotiations. So, this Forensic Architecture specifically says, and this is important, these two corridors, Netzarim and the new one, are infrastructural indications of an intended permanent Israeli military presence in the northern parts of the occupied Gaza Strip.
But now there's even more evidence of these attempts at a permanent presence there. And at the Netzarim corridor, satellite images now also revealed by Ynet show that they're building 4 outposts for military barracks, for permanent, barracks for the soldiers. At the same time, there's an image that made the rounds over the weekend of the Philadelphia corridor being asphalted, being like asphalt being laid down. And these, to go back to the ceasefire talks, as I said, these are kind of what they're being called the impossible demands from Israel. Because what is Hamas asking? Hamas is saying, we need the Israeli army to withdraw entirely from Gaza, right? How can you have safety? How can you have reconstruction? How can you even start to look for more bodies if the army that is committing a genocide remains? This is what Hamas is asking. They're saying you need to leave. And these are what, Netanyahu and company, including Joe Biden and company, are saying, no, the Israeli army is going to stay. How are they doing that? By building this new corridor, by building the large outposts to house a military in the Netzarim corridor, by, asphalting Philadelphia, Philadelphia is also a sticking point for the Egyptians, right? The Egyptians are the ones who keep saying, we don't want Israeli troops on the border. But this, again, just seems like the kind of thing, as we have seen with Turkey, as we have seen with Jordan, and, all the others, the kind of thing that they come out and say. That they come out and say because they know they need to say it, but in practice, they're sitting at that negotiating table in which the U.S. and Israel are just laughing at everyone's faces.
And I don't think they are even sitting. I think both Jordan and Egypt at this point, they are like collaborators with the Israelis and with the West, because historically, the West Bank should be under the rule of the Hashemite kingdom, which is currently King Abdullah, and Gaza should be under the rule of Egypt, which is now Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. And they don't care. They don't care. And the only actual actions that both of these countries took was to defend Israel against Houthis and against the Iranian missiles.
I mean, let's talk about the level of Arab collaboration with Israel. So Egypt, supposedly an impartial, neutral mediator in these negotiations for ceasefire in Gaza, has tripled its exports during the war in Gaza. We discovered last week in an exclusive reveal by the Arabi Post. So this is citing official data from the Israeli Central Bureau of Statistics, shows that between October and July this year, Egyptian imports from Israel reached $331.6 million. It was $106.8 million during the same periods in 2022 and 2023. 3 times the exports to Israel from Egypt during its genocide of Arabs and Muslims in Gaza. Now, more interesting is that 5 Egyptian ports have been transformed into major trading hubs for shipments to Israel's Ashdod and Haifa ports. There's literally a new game between Egypt and Israel during the Gaza genocide to offset the Yemeni attacks on shipping to Israel. So basically, Egypt and Israel, which through our map you can see are very close to each other, have this nonstop action. And the report says there are 19 ships, key ships, cargo ships and cement ships largely, that just keep going back and forth between these 5 Egyptian ports and the 2 Israeli ports, basically supplying the occupation state with all it needs to offset the Yemeni siege of Israel. Can you imagine that the Egyptians are mediators of this? The Qataris play absolutely with the Israelis, and the Americans are not remotely interested in a Palestinian view on this. They have their own constructs that they intend to impose on Palestinians that are undemocratic constructs from outside on a population that literally just needs to breathe and get basic food, water, electricity, and supplies. This is absolutely bogus. I am so mad that Sisi, okay, is pretending to be an Arab and Muslim at this point, sitting in these negotiations and basically stopping, continuing the siege of Gaza. He can open the Rafah border and charge right in and have hundreds of aid trucks go in, right? But no, instead of aid to people who were absolutely dying, in the droves every day, now not just because of airstrikes, but because of starvation, because of disease, because of lack of medical care, he's actually supplying the aggressor. Sisi is supplying the genocide state and not Gaza. And it is his choice.
Yeah. So yes, it's very interesting, this thing about the Egyptian ports, because you also need to consider, right? When we talked a few minutes ago about the shipments that the U.S. has been sending to Israel, they talk about 107 ships. And we know that these often carry jet fuel, right? Like this is how they deliver it. What level of complicity is there as well? What ports are the ships stopping on? Is Egypt involved in this, right? Like all of this, I'm sure, is being kept under wraps. Because there's also another thing that we saw over the recent days, and it was this report showing the biggest exporters of oil to Israel. And among them, you find a bunch of African countries. You find Gabon, you find Nigeria, Congo, Brazzaville. You also find Brazil. Brazil, Latin American nation that has politically been on the right side-ish of what's happening in Gaza, not as committed as others. But just like Turkey, Turkey, a completely different example, being an Islamic nation, but they have continued to allow trade and oil to go.
We have to be really careful with these statistics because oftentimes the source of origin is not actually how the occupation state ultimately receives oil and gas shipments. It can come through a third state. This is also, we've seen since the war in Ukraine, European states buying Russian gas, but through the Indians. So they're not really ever saying they're buying Russian gas or and oil. In the case of Brazil, that may be the issue. But all of these states rushing to aid the occupation state, with basic energy needs. Meanwhile, Lebanon's electric company basically shut down, saying we have no more fuel for electricity. Everyone is now relying entirely on generators. One state steps up to provide energy for Lebanon. That's Algeria. One state. Unconditionally, right? Of course, Iran probably is. We're just not hearing about it a lot because even the Lebanese who are opposed to Iran or this country don't, they just want the fuel at this point. They don't want to make a big stink of it. So it's kind of outrageous that you have a dozen countries rushing to fuel the genocidal state, and then you have one country offering fuel to Lebanon, and only one Muslim country, and only one Arab country, the same one.
So the only reason I brought it up is because the research essentially says all of these nations could be complicit in genocide. Like right now, just dealing with Israel in almost any term will down the line beg the question, were you complicit in genocide? And I think just, nations across the world really need to start asking themselves this question because it's going to come back at them. So one last thing we really should discuss this week, which is, last week, a large chunk of our show was essentially about how we got banned by Meta. And, we are gone from all Meta platforms. Check it out if you didn't listen to the episode last week. Then we saw a Syrian-British journalist, Richard Medhurst, announce that he was arrested during the month of August upon arrival at Heathrow Airport under the Terrorism Act, right? And now, more recently, Pavel Durov, the CEO and founder of Telegram, right? This platform that has been has been completely essential for covering the situation in Gaza in particular, is arrested in France, despite holding French citizenship, under just like charges that bring to mind the persecution against Julian Assange. They are accusing him of saying he was wanted on charges of allowing drug dealers and sex criminals to operate on the app, allegations of fraud, drug trafficking, organized crime, promotion of terrorism, and cyberbullying. Essentially what France is saying is, you were not censoring Telegram, so now we're going to arrest you. Because, and then, we also saw a Resistance News Network, one of these Telegram channels that has been essential for what's happening in Gaza, be banned in the EU. There was a whole profile in some Western outlet, I forget which it was, in which they talk about how, the Resistance News Network and Telegram as a whole is facilitating, for terrorism and this and that, their favorite word. So this has kind of become very...
They escalate.
Yeah, it's become condensed over the past couple of weeks. It's just happened like one after the other. You've had a Scott Reeder's home be raided by the FBI. You've had everything I just listed, including ourselves.
After an interview with Pepe Escobar, something happened. But actually, there is such an acceleration of censorship activity by U.S. Platforms that it's hard not to suspect that there is coordinated activity going on. And one of the things we came across in our investigation of our case with Meta is the involvement of a group of former Israeli military guys who have an organization called Cyberwell, which we will be publishing about this week or next. They're launching activities with Meta in July that may have actually impacted the Cradle, because as we showed in our podcast and our many talks with different media and in our article on the subject, the Cradle doesn't really violate any community guidelines. So we were picked on based on, they used some for posts as an excuse, posts that are much tamer than what exists in other media platforms, larger media platforms who are not banned. Then took down our secondary account and then took down our Facebook account. So it was a company-wide, it was an effort to silence the Cradle on these two platforms. And, we're even looking into the potential lawsuit. We're talking to digital rights attorneys because I think it's really important to step up, if you have the resources, to step up and stop these nefarious censorship activities as they take off, not wait until they manage to normalize these activities. And then you feel like, and then people start thinking, oh, well, what can we do about it? Do it at the beginning. So we are talking to digital rights lawyers and others who have prosecuted these kinds of cases before and seen what walls they come up against and where there are possibilities in suing for justice.
No, it's absolutely necessary. Absolutely necessary. And in particular now, right? We saw what they did with TikTok in the US, right? Because why? Because they were losing the narrative. They they lost the narrative in TikTok in regards to the genocide in Gaza. I think even Biden may have said something about it, Blinken, it was Blinken who said it, that we lost, the narrative. And now they're going after Telegram. Now they're going after the platforms. We know, right? We knew Meta. Like I said last week, the Meta thing was not unexpected. Right now we are on a Google-owned platform. We are trying to be as careful as possible, but we also know that this is not, a fair playing field. X, I guess it's just a matter of time, suddenly.
I don't know. Elon Musk is throwing his hat into the Pavel ring, saying, look, it's just us holding off the censorship. What we'll see, yeah. Right?
We'll see.
So we were investigating this weekend other sites, because obviously people were talking about a long time about having alternative sites to these mainstream social media platforms. And we discovered one, I think it was thanks to one of the comments in our last podcast, or I saw it somewhere else, where Reds, REDZ, was introduced to us. And it's a platform we're considering joining. It's like Instagram. It's very fast and it's very professional. It is location-based. So right now, all we can see is Arabic language videos. But we also noticed there's a lot of activity on there, because posts get like 400,000 likes. We thought maybe we'd come across a platform. By the way, this is apparently built in Ramallah, Palestine. But it is global, and it started off very well because it has a critical mass already on there. The goal is to start bringing more media in and then having the English language much more prominent on there. I didn't notice any difference between that and Instagram. To be completely honest, we were surprised. Our minds were blown. So I think by next week, you're going to see the Cradle, both English and Arabic, up on Red. So please, download the app and sign up and start making it a platform that can just as easily access English language videos, because all it takes is for that critical mass to join there, and then that language explodes.
Yeah, so, one of the things that they were apparently going after Durox, and that he was refusing the advances from like the FBI and other of these agencies to allow backdoors, right, into his platform to fight terrorism, right? And one last thing that I want to bring up is also the CEO, the co-founder of Rumble. He already left France. He already left Europe.
He said he tweeted or something that he just left Western Europe, so he's out of the danger zone. I mean, can I tell you, like, you guys know, so I live in England as well as
you did
in Beirut, and I was sufficiently worried because I know at least two journalists, both of them British, white British journalists, who were stopped under sort of this terrorism act in the UK. And so what I did is I sought legal advice from a top-notch attorney in this field in the UK. And there are a number of things you can do if they stop you at the airport or point of entry into the UK to minimize what they can do, because really they're there to intimidate you.
Exactly.
They're there to take your data, basically. Okay.
To grab your phone.
They're there to download all your data. So, go with clean devices for one. But I literally, I hope just by saying it, I will sort of stop their ability to do it to me. But at the same time, it's just something one anticipates could happen. It's like if you travel through Ben Gurion Airport and you're not Jewish, okay, and you're traveling to the occupied territories, you will be hassled. But now to get that at Heathrow Airport is astounding to me. Literally the authoritarian kind of censorship that the West has been warning us about from Iran, from Russia and China is happening widely and accelerating throughout Western capitals.
And the UK now, you might face jail if you retweeted something.
What was the thing before you post? That was what the government said on X. That's like the UK government account said thing before.
I saw as if it was somebody who was detained because he liked a post. Like a post, and
it's true.
If you might be sleeping and like a post, and you wake up in jail in the UK, that's insane.
That could happen to you, indeed. Like the terrorism act is insane, because like
me too. I fall asleep. I butt dialed my tweet.
Yeah, you butt like the Cradle.
I butt like the Cradle. Yeah.
Like the terrorism act. Just before we close, because I think this should be made clear. It stipulates that a person commits an offense if they invite support for a prescribed organization, express an opinion that is supportive of such an organization, among other things. So, invite support for a prescribed organization, right? In this case, think about Hamas, right? Think about the Palestinians fighting against this genocidal war, or the Lebanese in the south fighting against this genocidal army. To say, to raise the Palestinian flag, to say you support Palestine, to say that you don't condemn them for trying to break out of prison, right? The prison, the only place they have ever known, most of these fighters, is to support terrorism. And that is just, that should send a chill down the spine of absolutely everyone listening to this.
By the way, really what they count on is for people not to have money to file lawsuits. Because if you file lawsuits, you're going to win a lot of these cases, the vast majority of them. Because you do have the First Amendment. Have the First Amendment. It's just that, literally, this is the kind of case that can go to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court, what are they going to do? So I want to say that, of course, most people can't file lawsuits. But I feel like there's a whole lot of lawyers out there who are getting such excellent cases that you're going to find quite a few pro bono cases because the case is almost perfect. Filed in their perfect jurisdiction will get a win. And that then sets a precedent. And these kind of lawyers who have been very concerned about civil rights and human rights now have a plethora of suits. They can easily find a perfect suit, win it, set the precedent, and the lawfare of the other side starts to unwind. I personally know of very high net worth individuals who are looking to select cases, perfect cases in perfect jurisdictions, to start filing and unraveling decades of lawfare, so that there will be a rush of private lawsuits that can be won, and reversing all of the occupations, achievements in international legal frameworks.
Exactly, and this
And American ones, because the social media thing, it's an American-Israeli project for sure.
Not just social media, but also like this idea of lawfare, of using the judicial system to bury these people in lawsuits. Someone like Richard Medhurst, or someone even like the Cradle, or someone like any one of us. It's a scare tactic, and you would hope that someday we will see the end of it. But I think,
Don't forget, we don't get scared. We double down on the Cradle.
we double down indeed. And thank you so much for joining us this week. Please make sure to like, to subscribe, to share, to follow us on the platforms where we still remain, including now Rumble and soon enough Rex.
Red, with a Z.
Ira said. And please check out our Patreon as well, so you can continue to support the Cradle. For the Cradle News Roundup, my name is Esteban Carrillo, and I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmeen Narwani.